Buenos días.
Good morning.
Distinguished youth delegates, please take your seats. Buenos días.
Good morning, colleagues, distinguished delegates, youth delegates. It is an honor for me to welcome you to this morning's session of the 2016 Youth Forum of the Economic and Social Council. I call to order this meeting. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, as announced in today's journal, we will hear highlights of this morning's breakout sessions on key regional priorities for youth development as part of a panel discussion on the topic of promoting youth as partners in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda priorities and next steps. Allow me to welcome our panelists today, Mr. Saya Abdullah, Youth Delegate of the Netherlands to the United Nations, Ms. Dorina Ljuka, Chief Executive Officer of the YMCA in Pristina, Ms. Hindou Oumarou Ibrahim, Coordinator of the Indigenous Women and Peoples Association of Chad, Mr. Max Trejo, Secretary General of the Ibero-American Youth Organization, and Mr. Rubén Urosa, General Director of the Spanish Youth Institute. It is also my pleasure to welcome the co-chair of the UN Interagency Network on Youth Development and Youth Policy Specialist in the Bureau for Policy and Program Support of the UN Development Program, Ms. Noella Richard. She will moderate our discussion this morning. Without further ado, I would like to turn the meeting over to our moderator. Ms. Richard, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Good morning, distinguished delegates, colleagues, partners, friends. My name is Noella Richard. I will be moderating this session. After setting the stage yesterday, acknowledging the role that young people have played in shaping the post-2015 agenda, it's now time to really look at concrete solutions and concrete recommendations to really see young people as partners in the implementation. Before moving to the panel, though, we have to give the floor to our rapporteurs from the regional breakouts. So I will ask rapporteurs to please intervene from the floor directly and also limit interventions to 3 minutes if possible. I will start with the breakout session on Sub-Saharan Africa. Ms. Francine Muyumba, President of the Pan-African Youth Union, you have the floor. I cannot see you, so I hope. Francine Muyumba? Sub-Saharan African Regional Breakout. I'm asking colleagues to please help on the floor, if you can locate colleagues. All right, we'll move to the next one. The breakout session on Europe, North America, and other states. Mr. Dejan Bojanic, board member of the European Youth Forum. You have the floor.
Thank you, Noelia.
Yes?
I
cannot see you.
Oh, I'm here on the balcony.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. We've just got back from the regional session where we tried to talk about the key regional priorities for youth development. We had mostly young people attending the breakout session with few representatives from member states as well. And the regions we focused on were Europe and North America. So what we discussed at first was just how universal the agenda really is. We try to reflect on ourselves to kind of make the point that we often tend to have a bit of a kind of a snobbish attitude of thinking that the Sustainable Development Agenda is something out there for someone out there. And people in the breakout session were really kind of ready to accept that we are all developing countries in many senses, and there is still a lot of space for all the countries to improve and to fully implement the Sustainable Development Agenda, to not have a patronizing approach to it, and to just kind of make sure that we are all a part of it. We then also try to kind of talk about what are the key issues for young people in our regions, and there were 4 issues that we specifically focused on. They are youth participation, risk of marginalization, then quality jobs, and access to rights. We try to get people to kind of prioritize which they think it's more relevant than others, and it was quite visible that a lot of people decided to go on a site where youth participation was discussed as the biggest issue for young people in the regions. There were a lot of talks about youth participation as well as the other challenges, but more than talking about challenges, we try to come up with the ways in which we can use the Sustainable Development Agenda to kind of make sure we tackle the issues that we identified. So there were a lot of different suggestions. Some of them was that if we look at the Sustainable Development Goals as actually rights, and we talk about kind of access to rights through working to implementation of the agenda, was one of them. Then a lot of groups saw that, you know, if we all have the same goals, if we all focus on the same thing, if we aim at the same thing, then it's much easier to bridge differences and gaps that exists between us, because we all kind of are aware that young people are not a there are different groups of young people. We're not a homogeneous group, and if we're all kind of working towards the same aims, it is much easier to bridge the gaps and work with each other. There were a lot of different reflections. I understand that I don't have much more time, but just kind of the final conclusion would be that there was kind of strong impulse from the participants of the session that it would be very good if more representatives from member states were there. It would be proper dialogue between young people, and if we would talk about youth participation, actually if we would not talk about youth participation anymore, but to actually participate and actually communicate with decision makers and present our opinions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Diane. We'll now move to the breakout session on Latin America and the Caribbean, for which we have 2 rapporteurs. The first one is Tijani Christian, the chairperson of the Caribbean Regional Youth Council. Please, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. The 3 main areas came up for us that we're going to really thematically encapsulate everything in. The first area was awareness. In terms of the awareness of the SDGs, one of the gaps that we found was that before we are already into SDGs and some persons are still not aware of MDGs. So we need to bridge that gap in terms of allowing persons to be aware of what exactly we're talking about, and what we mean by that. We need to we need to translate the language of the document into a more friendly approach, in terms of a youth-friendly approach of the document. Probably a popular version of the SDG showing how we can do this, or how relevant is it to each country's reality and not like as an isolated issue. So that was one of the things that we look at in terms of awareness of the SDG agenda.
Nayeli Yoval, coordinator of the Latin American and Caribbean Youth Alliance, please.
Sí, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I will speak in Spanish. Some of the aspects we addressed in our session was that of implementation and the challenges to implementation in our region. We spoke clearly of issues like education and the involvement of young women and young people in the economy, especially when we talk about young women, the so-called ninis that are not involved and not participating, and who have children to take care of, for example. And we talked about implementation agenda 2030. It's important for young people to be truly involved from the steps of design development through implementation of national policies, especially from the local level, because we saw that generally this type of agreement that is reached globally does not easily reach the local level. So it's important for us to involve young people in the whole process. We also discussed resources and how to achieve implementation nationally and locally, and had the opportunity also to speak about how youth ministries must be involved in implementation of Agenda 2030 so that there can genuinely be consideration of youth issues in the agenda, even though the 17 SDGs don't specifically focus on young people. So we want to involve youth ministries in and mechanisms. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. We're now traveling to Asia and the Pacific. Our next reporter is Mr. Kishva Ambigapatik, Chair of the Commonwealth Youth Council.
Hi, good morning. We just finished a session with the vibrant youths from Asia and Pacific. And in that session, we had a very dynamic discussion onto how Asian youths would want to identify the way forward in bringing the Sustainable Development Goals. Three of the main recommendations which were put forth were: one, emerging priorities. The youths expressed the need to translate the Sustainable Development Goals into a more easily comprehensible format that grassroots level youths across Asia and Pacific can understand and then carry forward. We also identified the need to translate issues into projects and programs. It is important that we recognize the need of capacity building for youths to have ownership, sustain, and grow development programs. It is also wise to also consider the addressing of financial allocation to youth work. The second recommendation put forth was commitments and actions. Young people would like to develop or be involved in developing mechanisms to collaborate and partner with UN organizations, not only at the headquarter level, but also at the grassroots level, at their national country level. Youth leaders also would like to collaborate and synergize efforts with existing mechanisms and structures to ensure a sustained youth-led response and support to national governments. We also looked at how social media plays an important role in addressing youth action. It is also good to mobilize youths by highlighting issues that are neglected, but also provide solutions that youth can work at local and grassroots levels. And lastly, the third priority, or the third recommendation, is youth-led accountability mechanisms. It is time that youths step up and empower their youth councils by enforcing provisions to represent young people at national level, and a role for young people to keep their governments accountable to youth empowerment at the local level. Youth engagement has to go beyond representation to a much more coherent involvement in policy design, programming, and evaluation of policies and programs that affect them. Lastly, we identified the need to have intergenerational dialogues to be followed up with appropriate financing and budgeting allocations, including the recognition of youth work as professional work, and incentivizing youth practitioners to implement their work at national level, including the promotion of paid youth-led research and campaigns. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Next is for the Arab region, Mr. Mark Lasouawi, Senior Liaison Officer at the UNRWA Representative Office in New York.
Thank you. the breakout session on Middle East and Northern Africa provided a platform for youth participants and UN representatives to engage in a dialogue regarding the key development priorities for MENA youth, as well as specific challenges and opportunities youth face, especially in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. The MENA region remains under the rippling effect of the so-called Arab Spring, which added challenges resulting from insecurities and armed conflict and their humanitarian consequences. Against this backdrop, the MENA region is witnessing significant challenges for youth. Population growth and increased poverty, especially among the so-called marginalized, continue to have a negative impact on young people's ability to productively engage in development processes. Yet, across the MENA region, young women and men are driving innovation, creative solutions, and insights into addressing some of the humanitarian crises and development challenges. So, at this session, panelists and participants came up with 5 recommendations. 1. Using a positive development approach where young people are dealt with as resources and not problems should underpin youth work. Young people have demonstrated extraordinary resourcefulness, determination and responsibility in addressing the challenges they face. Safe and supportive environment where structural and social barriers to young people's engagement have been addressed and where young people feel appreciated, respected and empowered is what they need to be able to meaningfully participate and contribute to their community. Second, access to quality education, health services and information, livelihood, recreational and volunteer opportunities are key to empower young people. Equipping young people, especially girls, young refugees and the most disadvantaged with the information, attitude and skills, and providing them with the opportunities that allow them to develop their full potential and to engage with their family and community contribute to enhance the sense of agency and purpose among young people and allow them to be active and productive citizens. 3. Strengthening mechanisms for systematic engagement of young people, including girls and refugees, where they can participate and influence decisions that affect their lives at local, national and global levels, including in the planning and implementation of the humanitarian response, is instrumental for young people's development and empowerment. 4. Pay special attention to employment and entrepreneurship in the MENA region through creating opportunities for development, personal realization, and improved self-esteem and confidence. Youth with work are productive and positive members of society and play a key role in the development and stability of their home countries. Unemployment generates despair, loss of dignity, and combined with other factors may lead to extremism and decision to migrate. Helping young people transform their creative ideas into a successful business plan has many potential benefits, including direct and indirect job creation and the development of human capital and new skills. Last, and recommendation number 5, member states, donors, and all stakeholders need to invest in programs to promote adolescents and youth health, in particular mental health, prevention on non-communicable diseases, providing sexual and reproductive health services, sexuality education, access to contraceptives, HIV prevention, and violence, including gender-based violence programs. Programs should reach those most marginalized, particularly young adolescent girls, refugees, IDPs, and stateless persons. Member states should also take action necessary to end child, early and forced marriages, and female genital mutilation and other harmful practices. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Another attempt to get feedback from the regional breakout session on Sub-Saharan Africa, if Francine is in the room. Otherwise, I will request that perhaps you share in writing the recommendations so that we can incorporate them. Thank you very much. So we'll move to our excellent panelists, Dorina Ljuka, CEO of YMCA in Pristina, Saya Abdullah, Youth Delegate to the United Nations representing the Netherlands, Hindou, Oumarou Ibrahim, Coordinator of the Indigenous Women and Peoples Association of Chad, Max Trejo, Secretary General of OIJ, the Ibero-American Youth Organization, and Rubén Urosa, General Director of the Spanish Youth Institute. So as mentioned earlier, the overall objective of this session is to get a bit more concrete, to look into solutions and open up a dialogue on stakeholders' commitments to work with young people as partners of change in the implementation of the 2030 agenda. We will hear from panelists how they intend to work, how they work on a daily basis with youth as partners at different levels, and what opportunities or potential opportunities could be identified to scale up those efforts and also maximize the impact that we could all have in the context of the implementation. We will hear interventions for approximately 7 minutes, and after the panel there will be an opportunity to interact with the room. I will start with you, Dorina. From the perspective of your organization, YMCA, and the grassroots work that you're doing to promote and support youth participation, how do you see your role in this context, in the context of the implementation of the SDGs, and how can you facilitate greater youth participation in that context? Dorina, you have.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I represent YMCA, and our organization reaches impact of lives of close to 60 million young people. Half of them are 11 to 30 years old. And we are part of the International Coordinating Meeting of Youth Organization. It is a great concern to our organization the situation of young people today. And we are sure that it's a great concern to all the world. I am from Kosovo, exactly from Balkan region, a region that have been going through hard times for the last 20, 30 years. Where I'm from, more than 65% of our population are under 25 years old. We are all aware that, as we have seen in recent time, the high numbers of young people taking risk through sea, even now in winter time, they are running away from war, violence, persecution, poverty, and injustice to arrive as refugees in a Balkan region and trying to be safe in Europe. It is a wake-up call, and it's not a missed call. It is a call for us to create a better and safer environment so young people can grow up safe. There are so many untold stories of injustice towards young people. We believe this story is big as slavery and other horrible episodes of human history. Wherever a young person is not safe, we all fail. I have been a refugee myself, and no one can teach you how to survive in the situation like that. I was only 14 years old, and I didn't know how to protect myself when I found myself in a mountain, living with no food on the snow time. I was told I need to make sure my hair is messy, so while I walk through soldiers, I will not be raped, like a lot of women in my age did. Lucky, I passed that phase safe. I could be filled up with hate, but I chose not to, and this is all thanks to the youth organizations. They taught me through non-formal education about reconciliation and peace building, and a special thanks to the YMCA. YMCA empowered me to make a difference wherever I am, and most important, they believed in me. YMCA gave me space, and I started as a volunteer, and today I lead the whole organization in my country. Today, leaders in different countries don't have a lot of faith in youth. They think youth can't be trusted, or youth are not experienced, or they can't lead because they don't know how. We all have to challenge that way of thinking. We have to trust every single young person for their potential and think that after 15 years, they will be the one leading the world. The youth of today are not only the future, they're also here in the present, and we need to invest in them. How do we want the picture to look like after 15 years? Involvement of young people in decision-making, it is essential in all levels. Encouraging them to thrive and achieve their dreams, and most important, believing in them is the way forward. We should deepen our partnership, United Nations, governments, the private sector, civil society organization. We should all bring together our forces and make a difference. And this difference can only happen if youth are not only the target, but they are the stakeholders and should actively be involved, participating in decision-making from local to global level. Young people, we know how it feels to be unemployed. We know how it is to be disencouraged and how it is to feel discriminated by gender. Young people know how it feels to be deprived of education and basic human rights. Technological advancement, shifting perception, and not stable environments require new, enhanced, and effective response mechanism. Achieving 17 goals by 2030 is a very hard road. However, we are lucky. For every problem, there is more than one solution. Increasing investment in young people is the key. This includes promoting quality education that prepares them for the future. It is essential to empower women and girls and ensure their sexual and reproductive health and human rights. A lot of times, youth organizations are underestimated. We have to remember they play a big role in achieving this plan until 2030 falls under youth organizations. Youth organizations all around the world have a lot of potential, as they are the first to give a hand to young people in need, especially in those in high-risk situations and environments. I believe that they are a big potential to deliver programs and address all SDGs in an efficient and cost-effective way. Youth organizations are very good in management. We have democratic and high level of quality governments. We can use money better than many. I call today to share more responsibility with youth organizations. Partner with us. Partner with youth organizations. As YMCA, we have been serving people for more than 170 years. And we are committed to support and address all SDGs in our 12,000 locations around the world, where we work locally, nationally, and internationally. We have a lot of experience in cooperating with United Nations agencies around the world. From Argentina and Brazil, they work with UNICEF on children and youth involvement. Similar cooperation we have in Lebanon. In Kosovo, where I'm from, we work with United Nations volunteers on environment protection. In a global level, we have experience partnering with ILO, UNDP, and UN Habitat in different initiatives. We cannot talk about sustainable development without the active involvement of youth. I would like to state that as part of a global youth empowerment movement, we confirm our commitment to help achieve SDGs, so partner with us. In this forum, we have representatives from the International Coordination Meeting of Youth Organization. We are here. Talk to us, talk to all of us. Together, we reach more than 150 million people per year. In conclusion, I would like to say that in the world today, youth are not the problem. Youth are the solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this hopeful and powerful message on the importance of ensuring participation of young people as individuals, yes, but more importantly as well through movements and organization. I think this is really important to note. Youth organizations are a credible partner and need to be fully engaged. Thank you very much. We will now move to turn to Saya. Saya, who represents his national government, the Netherlands, as a United Nations youth delegate here in the system. So we would like to hear, in your opinion, and based on your interactions with peers, with UN entities, with decision makers, what do you think would be an enabling environment for an enhanced youth participation in the context of the implementation of the agenda, and what role in particular youth delegates can play?
Yes. Thank you for the warm introduction, Noelia. Dear Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates, and dear friends. First of all, I want to give my compliments to the organization of the forum this year. I am delighted to see that the ECOSOC Youth Forum has evolved itself since last year and has grown. And as Noelia said, I have the honor to be one of the 15 UN youth delegates here at the ECOSOC Youth Forum. As a youth delegate, you form the link between policymakers and between the young people in your country. In my country, the Netherlands, the Youth Delegate Program is now running for more than 40 years. To become a youth delegate, you have to be elected amongst the young people through a public election. On a yearly basis, we speak to thousands of youngsters. We try to bring their voice to the decision-making table. We have also the privilege to be part of the official delegation of our countries at international events, for example, here at the United Nations. And as you may have heard this line before, half of the world is under 25 years old, and 90% of these youngsters are living in developing countries. And as my colleague from Germany said, 90% or the vast majority of the UN youth delegates are from Western countries. Now, in order to implement the SDGs and to use the youth delegates to promote them, there needs to be equal representation. So if you're interested to set up this program in your country, you can approach me later on or one of the other youth delegates. We can provide you with the steps and information needed. Also to mention, the World Federation of United Nations Association has done a tremendous job in promoting the youth delegate program. You can also approach them for more information. Now about the implementation of the SDGs, there has been a push to recognize the role of volunteering of youngsters in implementing them. Young people already are delivering change all around the world. For example, this summer I attended the World Humanitarian Youth Summit consultation in Doha. There I had the privilege to meet a colleague from Sierra Leone. She told me that in her country, the youngsters led the biggest social mobilization to fight Ebola. So I think it's time that we paid more attention to the investment in the youth sector by enlarging the capacity of these youngsters and their organizations. The exclusion of youth from policy-making processes and power structures, deliberate or unintentional, can create significant tensions in society, which can manifest itself in forms that represent a serious threat to the social fabric, such as, for example, crime and violence. Now, in the worst cases, a poor economic and social environment can foster conditions in which youth without prospects are manipulated by leaders and are recruited or forced into armed conflicts. Now, if I would ask you here in the room the question, where or when the largest youth gathering was last year, you would not have imagined this answer. Almost 20,000 youngsters were attracted to the Middle East region and recruited by ISIS last year. And as the Special Envoy on Youth, Mr. Al-Hindawi, mentioned, the dominant discourse on youth often portrays young people as either victims or perpetrators of violence. We can't ignore that young people are the main demography to be radicalized and that youth who experience violence and displacement have their future jeopardized. So luckily things slightly started to change, and on the 9th of December 2015, the United Nations Security Council adopted the first ever thematic resolution on youth, peace and security. The document outlines the duties of parties to armed conflict to protect young people in conflict and post-conflict settings. It also calls governments to promote youth participation in decision-making at all levels, including in processes of peace building. Now, to conclude my statement, young people can play a critical role throughout the implementation of the SDG cycles, including in contributing to effective accountability by being involved in the decisions that affect them and by contributing to the monitoring of results on the ground. And we, as youth delegates, can maybe function at this point as a bridge between you and your government. And perhaps most importantly, together with you, we can help to ensure that any new set of commitments is fulfilled by governments and all others who will contribute toward achieving the post-2015 agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Saya, for highlighting the importance of engaging with young people at the front line also of the response to crisis, and in particular the role that young people can play as volunteers. And thank you as well for advocating for the Youth Delegates program as UN entity, as a UN entity here. Always very happy to support also these efforts. I will turn to you, Hindou. Je vais m'adresser à toi en français.
So now, in French, indeed represents a civil society organization which plays a significant role in the promotion of women and indigenous women in particular, and particularly young indigenous women. So what is the particular way of these marginalized young groups to mobilize towards achieving the SDGs? Thank you very much. Hello to everyone. And thank you for holding this panel and for having organized a forum for sustainable development goals for youth. First, I would like to say that I come from one of the indigenous communities, which is more than the 300,000 in this world. We conserve more than 80% of the biodiversity in the world. And if we're talking about biodiversity, we can't talk about it without talking about biodiversity. I come from Chad, and I come from Palma, which is a region of nomads and semi-nomads. Up to this point, we are still 100% nomads. But if we talk about Chad and about indigenous peoples in general, we are among the most marginalized communities which don't have access to development. We've been dealing for more than 40 years with the civil war in Chad, and what's happening in the field now is insecurity at the regional level, and this insecurity is a factor of destabilization in states. And outside of this destabilization, we have other issues, the environment and climate change, for example. And this does not favor development. But in my community, where we protect women, because we say that women are factors of development, they represent more than 55% of the population, and most of the population is younger. 40 to 50% are really the youngest in the community. There's no access to education. There's no access to water. So goals 4 and 6, there's no access to energy. And the work is not decent work. So we can't talk about development without talking about women. And girls don't have their space in this society. So what do we do to make sure they have a space in society? One of the examples, where I am, I went to school but with great difficulty because there was never a school in my community. But my parents migrated to the city so that I could go to school. I was marginalized at school. When I sat down, no other child wanted to sit next to me because I came from an indigenous community. But that didn't stop me as a woman, as a girl, to move in the right direction. And if I say the right direction, since I was a child, I said, why are we different? So we created an association of young and marginalized. So we tried to develop a system to see how we can integrate young people at the national level. So through the Youth Association at the national level, I realized that I had been lucky because I went to school. And what is the destiny of the girls in my country who are married at the age of 10 years old, and that continues up through the present time? So we said, we're going to create this Indigenous Peoples Association, Indigenous Women's Association in Chad. And this rights up front to the rights of women and the rights of the environment, we can't separate them. And in these rights, we say, women first. Why do they marry us? And these are forced marriages at the age of 10 years. We don't have a choice, and we don't have a choice to go to school either. It's very difficult because the rights of women are marginalized in Africa, and we're all from Africa. So up to this point in time, we're trying to talk about quotas for women. But when we talk about the place for women, we're not talking about a place for girls. And we're not talking about rural areas. We're talking only about those in cities. And if we count here what represents us, even in this youth forum, most people come from capitals. So what is the fate of those in rural communities and who don't have a voice? But the Sustainable Development Goals have not been set only for the large countries or for capitals, but for the entire world. So what can we do so that we can achieve these goals? First, we can measure the MDGs. And we can see that we haven't achieved them at 100% in the countries. And if we look where we didn't achieve them, it's in the most marginalized communities and in the rural areas where we have not achieved the goals. So to avoid this error and to, in the future, to achieve the SDGs, we need to respect these populations who are marginalized, who are on the lower level. They're not just ignorant, they have an added value for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. But we need to give them the opportunities. And in order to give them opportunities, we need to have more cooperation. We need to take into account the needs of these populations at the very beginning. We can't lay out a development plan for them, but we need to give them the capacity, give us the capacity to design our own development plans. And I can assure you that girls and boys, young men and women, we have plans for development. We want to go to school, but we don't have to go to school in order to learn the history of other countries. We need to go to school in order to be able to solve the problems that we are facing, how to resolve conflicts where we live. We need to learn this from very young. Also, sustainable development. We can learn this from a very young age, and that's what we need at our level. We need for us to be, we need to have our voices heard. We need to be listened to, but not planned for. We need to make our own plans. So for the child, we need to give them another chance. We need a place created for us, and then we will change the world together. Thank you.
Magnifique. Merci beaucoup, Hindou.
Thank you very much. That was excellent.
Merci d'avoir rappelé l'importance de...
Thank you for having recalled the importance of these priorities at the local and national level, and to really be sure that we take into account the most marginalized peoples. Thank you for this very hopeful message. Now I will give the floor to Max Trejo.
Tú representas una organización.
Max, you represent an organization that is multi-governmental. Its main aim is inclusion and integration of young people through public policies. So we'd like to hear about your vision, the vision of your organization, OIJ, to integrate these SDGs. Thank you very much, Noella, and everyone here for those excellent presentations we've heard this morning. I want to thank Mr. Mandahwe for providing this space, and the youth councils and youth representatives and young people here in the room in particular. I wish to pay tribute to you and thank you, the ministers of Latin America. I see Brazil and other colleagues from Costa Rica, Ricardo from Mexico, etc. And the president of OIJ. So we're all here. And this morning, it's an honor for me to be here to represent this organization, Ibero-American Youth Organization. It works on youth issues in the international context and involves more than 1,600 people. We are here to have a dialogue about the new international architecture for our activities in the context of SDGs and Agenda 2030. And I believe firmly that, without a doubt, recently we've seen how important a role youth has played on the international agenda. We've had a number of international meetings and forums dealing with youth. We have a special envoy dealing with youth, and there are programs addressing strategic development policies for youth, for health, education, the environment, energy, and other objectives that fall under the SDGs. So this is just an example to show empirically that the world addresses development from a youth perspective. They're the ones who will make decisions in the future. Dear friends, colleagues, I'm going to be politically incorrect, and I will dare say here that youth is important on the global international scene. But so far, the role has not been very strong. So what we need to do is act. And that is what I want to say here. We need to move away from words and take specific actions. We need to take actions for effective policies, for effective protection of rights. And we need to act to promote this socio-political policy aspect and develop that. We here present today need to act. We need to be committed towards this responsibility to transform our context. It's not enough to have flowery words. We need to act. We need to involve young people. And defining sustainability, this is the first time young people have had a voice to have a more decent world, and the SDGs lack direct reference to youth, their essence, and that is young people. And the human condition is characterized by young people and in the context of implementing the SDGs. So this international organization is 20 years old. We have been endeavoring to involve young people, and we have this reality in our region. And there are two sides of the coin. On the one hand, there's a favorable environment for young people, for them to be empowered and drivers in their countries, but we also have young people who are excluded and vulnerable. They are marginalized from these processes. So there are these two sides, and we need to take better action to address these two sides. There's a diagnostic situation that you're very familiar with, and probably more than we are, but we want to contribute towards public action, policies to help young people. And that is why we need to tap into this Agenda 2030 and move from words to action. As we see it, the priorities for implementation of 2030 the indicators will be important in that respect. So currently these are being discussed, these indicators, and these are crucial. It is crucial to involve young people in that aspect. And there needs to be regional, local, global commitment. It is an imperative that youth be a key part of the development of our peoples. And there's also a regional commitment. In the coming weeks, we will start a participative process involving more than 20 countries in the Americas, and they will start this process to establish goals and targets and indicators dealing with youth in Ibero-America. Heads of state and of government will be discussing this at the next summit of heads of state in Colombia. The 21 countries of the region have endorsed the agenda, of course, but the countries of the region and of the Caribbean are involved in the Montevideo Consensus and strengthening that. There are a number of issues there that still need to be advanced. With regard to the UN indicators, more efforts need to be made in that respect. There's a growing interest by youth officials to be part of this organization. There's another component. We need to set out effective public policies. There are many factors involved, but there are two in particular. Monitoring of social protection for youth in the world. The main one is to modernize the institutional youth systems. And we need to take advantage of technology and innovation in the public sector in this respect, but also strengthen the capacity of governmental agencies so that public policies can address this. There are also objectives. There's a cross-cutting intersectoral strategy, and it's key for joint efforts to be undertaken in this respect. As a subject of law, young people have rights. Young people are interconnected. They have a voice locally and regionally, and we need to be careful when we look at this focus and this approach, this intersectoral approach, because when we talk about cross-cutting issues, this must go beyond focusing on one reality. Another element that we are committed to moving towards actions and away from words, and that has to do with the effective promotion of rights. My organization for 10 years has been promoting the only international convention dealing with youth, and that is the International Convention for the Rights of Young People. And this is to have public policies that are rights-based. We are committed this year in updating this Ibero-American Convention on the Rights of Young People. We did achieve protection for young people, but we hope that this can be more useful to young people, for it to be more cross-cutting and incorporate third and fourth generation rights. There are new aspects involved, and we are going to go to national forums to promote this with the government in order to promote this Ibero-American Convention for the Rights of Young People. As we heard from panelists earlier in the roundtables, what we need to do to achieve this social and political transformation is to tap into the tremendous potential of new generations. And this requires certain elements. Today, young people cannot suffer from lack of protection of their social rights. They need to be inserted into the job market. And there is a deep divide in addressing labor and youth employment in our region. And the ILO has an initiative that we will join, and this is under the mandate of youth organizations. because employment is very important to address. In the context of implementing Agenda 2030, we wish to support this initiative of the government of Spain for youth employment to review job flexibility, because we see this being reduced today, and to address the informal sector. We also need to address violence in our region. We must act and on this imbalance. We need this to be reflective of the population. So we need to think very deeply on the behavior and the public spending, how this is being undertaken, and to enhance investment in youth policies to focus on the well-being of all. So we continue to be committed to these issues, and this new Director General will take over within a month, and we will continue to have these conversations with different countries. We will endorse these actions and activities. To conclude, I wish to invite you to work with the United Nations agencies, to work with the funds, the United Nations funds and programs, to make efforts and not duplicate initiatives, to work together with the UN or other agencies and work hand in hand. Lastly, I would respectfully here ask to set up a high-level group to work on the promotion of rights of young people in terms of the SDGs and the interests that countries have in youth issues. Just a few weeks ago in Davos at the World Economic Forum, the UN agencies and the private sector was involved in addressing gender matters, and this is available now. And we need to help to bring this to the millions of youth. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Max, por estos.
Thank you very much, Max, for this very strong appeal. It's important to strengthen the role of young people in monitoring, as you said, and we definitely want to continue that with you. Now, Max mentioned the campaign of the Decade of Youth Employment, and we'll hear more about that in a minute. We'd like to hear from you about the Spanish Youth Institute from Mr. Urosa and the next steps of this campaign.
Colleagues, I think we need help with the sound. Thank you. Rubén, si quieres empezar a hablar.
Rubén, if you'd like to begin. Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. At the outset, I wish to thank you for inviting us to be here today, and thank especially my colleague for his work and management over the years. As we've heard from Max, we have for many years been able to place these youth issues on the global context. Especially in Azerbaijan, we met, and in 1998 in Portugal, in Lisboa, we started these efforts. I also wish to pay tribute to all the governments for having placed youth policies at the heart of their policy. I wish to publicly thank you for your work and welcome all the other panelists here at the podium. this will make my work all the harder after having heard your outstanding presentations. And I also wish to thank my colleague Max. It's an honor to work with this organization, the Ibero-American Youth Organization, and we are pleased to work. There's an office in Madrid that we work with, and I'm in contact with him quite frequently. I also wish to thank the Spanish board council that is represented here, and the other agency from Spain that is truly playing a leading role in these efforts. We are working with civil society for years now, and this was the dream of three of us. We have been discussing a project within the United Nations in this respect. After all the discussions we've heard already, it's hard for me to now address this. Young people are subjects of law. We heard from our colleague from Costa Rica yesterday. We heard Max mention the importance of social investment in youth. Well, we have a study underway in the region. It's been underway for a few years to see that only 10% of resources of our governments are allocated to youth matters, whereas youth represents 30% of the population in the area. So I agree with Max fully and with the special envoy for youth that the time has come to move away from words towards action. The time has come. And so I wish to focus here on SDG 8, employment. I believe that this goal and the other goals depend strongly on this particular aspect, and that is to have access to labor for young people. And when we address social, economic development of youth and participation of youth, it will be very difficult to achieve all of those goals without addressing youth employment. And as we start this decade and this project, there's a resolution that has been established to address youth employment, a decade for youth employment. In Spain, we've been working on this. And we've been working on this because we have 75 million young people in the world who don't have access, and many of them don't have access to quality jobs. Yesterday we heard from Benin about access of young people. But we're not just talking about the future of young people, but of the whole planet here. So based on a proposal we discussed with the UNDP and with the Ibero-American Secretary General and the OIJ, with civil society, with various trade unions, etc. We consulted with all of these, and the government of Spain decided to launch a campaign. And this is made up of civil society, of trade union members, etc., to have this campaign. And this is very closely related to the global strategy for decent jobs that we heard about yesterday. For many years, Spain has been in discussion with the ILO to see how to implement this decade of youth employment based on this global strategy that was presented, and to ensure this is a reality. So we think that we are very close to making good progress on these. The Spanish government aims to play a very active role together with the UN and to lead this global initiative for decent employment. We have been working in parallel, and in the context of the campaign, more than 500 entities have been involved in a number of countries, and as I said, I think this has been a success, and it's important to note 3 aspects that we wish to implement in this respect. First is to address gender. We need to seize this opportunity because half of the talent in the world is very important to involve. We need to work together and urgently involve a gender approach to involve women into the labor market on a massive scale. The next aspect is to generate specific action plans for the most marginalized communities so as to leave no one behind. And the third aspect that is very important, and we've been hearing about this over the days, and that is that the youth employment problem is one for all. It affects civil society, businesses, trade unions. And it's a problem, obviously, for young people who are the main ones who suffer from this. So we need public-private initiatives and civil society to be involved. Together, as Max said, as the Special Envoy said, we can move from the global to the local level, to move from words to actions, and once and for all, take specific action. As we heard earlier, it's important. Yesterday we heard from Benin, and that was one of the statements I heard that motivated me very especially, so I want to go along those lines. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Rubén.
Thank you very much, Rubén, for that contribution.
Yo firmo porque todos los jóvenes se merecen brillar.
Yo firmo porque todos tenemos metas y luchamos por llegar a ellas.
Yo firmo porque no tenemos miedo al fracaso.
Yo firmo porque el tiempo corre a contrarreloj.
Yo firmo porque recogemos el testigo de nuestra sociedad.
Yo firmo porque tenemos que apostar por la cantera.
Yo firmo porque siempre hay que tener un plan alternativo.
Yo firmo porque cada prueba superada cuenta. Todo suma.
Yo firmo porque si queremos llegar lejos, debemos ir acompañados.
Yo firmo porque nos merecemos dar el salto.
Yo firmo porque somos un valor para la sociedad, que confíen en nosotros.
Yo firmo porque tienes que creer en ti mismo. Yo firmo la campaña internacional para la declaración de la década del empleo juvenil.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I hear that a number of discussants would be interested in reacting, take the floor to make a comment or make a recommendation or perhaps ask a question to our panelists. So I will ask you to limit your reflections to 2 minutes maximum. I'm pleased to first invite the Minister of Youth and Sports of Ukraine, His Excellency Mr. Ilhor Zhdanov. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, dear Chairman, dear colleagues and friends. In the current situation, aggression against Ukraine, we Ukrainians more than ever understand and feel the need of international assistance and mutual responsibility for our common future in compliance with the principle of territorial integrity and respect of fundamental human rights. Today, we are facing new challenges in youth policy, working with the youth and supporting youth from temporarily occupied territories, internally displaced young people, youth that took part in military actions, and disabled youth. Unfortunately, the number of such young people is growing. Meanwhile, we are grateful to everybody who is not standing aside. A special gratitude must be expressed to the UN agencies, which are our reliable partners and provide us with the expert and resource support. In 2015, we have elaborated a new state program, Youth of Ukraine, for the 2016-2020, which defines the priorities of the state youth policy for the following 5 years. The program contains 5 priorities: forming civil position and national patriotic education of youth. The next, healthy lifestyle of youth, development of non-formal education, youth employment, youth housing, support of youth that lives on temporarily occupied territory of Ukraine and internally displaced persons. These priorities correspond to the Sustainable Development Goals and are aimed to create favorable conditions for inclusive development of youth, realization of its potential, and thus sustainable development of the country. We are ready to be engaged to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda and Sustainable Development Goals in Ukraine. UN agencies in Ukraine, with the participation of the ministry, have already held national consultation among children and youth on the most relevant sustainable development goals in our country. Sustainable development goals are high priority for Ukraine in order of priority ranking. Goal number 4, providing quality general education. Next, goal number 8, contributing to global and sustainable economic development. Goal number 3, promoting healthy lifestyle. Goal number 9, constructing of sustainable infrastructure. And goal number 16, facilitating to development of a just, peaceful, and inclusive communities. The motto of ministry activities is nothing for youth without youth. We have created a range of advisory agencies by the ministry, which consist of youth activities. Thus, we involve youth in planning, elaboration, and realization of the state youth policy. We gained successful experience of cooperation during development of state program. Only with the help of common efforts, we can achieve its effective implementation. We are facing a responsible task, implementation of the youth policy reform for youth and with youth. Jointly with civil society organizations, we have developed a roadmap of youth policy reform, where direction, objectives, tasks, and indicators of the successfulness are stated. It is the first step that we can make in terms of 2030 Agenda implementation. We expect United Nations support in this direction. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Excellencies. I have a number of member states that would like to take the floor, but to also reflect the philosophy of behind the ECOSOC Youth Forum, we will alternate between civil society representatives and member states, if that is okay. So next is Andreas Karsten, the CEO of Youth Policy Labs from Berlin, global youth advocate as well. Would you be able to share a few comments or maybe ask questions to our panelists?
Whenever the microphone comes on, lovely. Well, I guess most of us in this room know that youth participation is maybe one of the oldest discourses we have in the sector, and the arguments feel very familiar, and the positions are relatively clear. The rhetoric sounds a bit like an echo from last year's Youth Forum, or maybe the one before that. And don't get me wrong, the individual accounts are powerful, the work of the organizations in this space are useful, but somehow we have moved very, very little. And when we co-authored together with 18 young researchers the report From Rhetoric to Action, the part on youth participation was the most frustrating to write because so little seems to have substantially moved. And on the contrary, youth organizations and movements are claiming power, are trying to move things, and experience a heavy pushback that's stronger than it's been in many decades. Max just used the word flowery words and flowery arguments. And I have the feeling in this room we tend to like these flowery words a little too much. And so the questions that I have, more for my own head and not necessarily for anyone on the panel to specifically answer, but still is, where is participatory budgeting in UN agencies? Where is the next attempt, long promised and hotly awaited, for a youth rights charter at global level? Where is the funding to make this forum a truly representative global youth event, rather than one that has to rely on New York young people filling the seats in many sessions? Where is the right to veto for youth advisory boards at regional and national level? So just a few questions that are in my head that would substantially move things forward, at least in the arena of the United Nations, and I would be curious to hear a few reflections from the panelists on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we take more comments, if any of the panelists would like to respond. Rubén?
Sí.
Yes. Well, I share part of what I heard, as I was saying. With the envoy, we had an event in Azerbaijan, and for nearly 10 years we have been working with these governments and with young people at various levels. And this is making progress at a slower rate than we'd like to see. But yesterday, we saw that the global strategy for decent work, this is a fact. This is here, and we need to implement it. And we didn't have this just a few years back. So this is something concrete that we have now to work with, and we have to involve various players. So I do share some of your views. It is going more slowly than we would like, I agree. But we need to be steadfast on, I think we're here to stay to address the other issue. And the problems we face are complex in different parts of the world. There are various challenges we need to take on.
Great. Thank you very much. Hindou, you want to try? Anyone else? Max? Hindou?
Sí.
Okay.
Yo con el cariño de a mi presidente del Consejo.
Now, based on what we heard from the youth representative, we do need to work to action. We are trying to reach transformation, and for that we need to take specific actions. That's why we are here, to speak up and take up commitments and see to it that we have a transformation. And to have this Ibero-American movement. So far, this involves 21 countries in our region. But here, we want to establish regional targets and indicators for youth. This will be part of the Ibero-American treaty that we will be discussing shortly. This is a participatory initiative, and it's from the ground up. And this will involve young people and their representatives to have a say and work with government officials. We will also be promoting, and in Spain, there's a convention for the rights of young people. We need to update the rights. We heard about this, to update the third and fourth generation rights in that respect, and implement these actions and play our due role in Ibero-America.
Yeah, firstly, I really share all your ideas and the questions that you really ask about it. But we need really to see how globally the youth will be represented equitably and with all our differentiation. So for me, having like 700 youth here today and saying, yes, we involving you on the SDGs, and after that, when they are going to implement these different objectives of the SDG, we are not there, it's not making change. So in order to really involve all of us and to make the change, there is different fora. Like we have the FAO who are working on the food and security, and this is the objective 2. And we have also the gender. We have many other objectives in different forums and international conferences, but these conferences do not have a youth constituency who is really representative. So I think they need to reorganize this one to have a youth forum into all these systems, and we can make our voice there here. Then not only at the international level, but the government need to change the views. Creation of the Ministry of Youth, yes, thank you, but no. Is it only the Ministry of the Youth who have to talk about the youth? No. I think all the ministries need to involve youth. The finance ministry need to recruit youth to see how they can make all them knowledge from the university there to take into account the fresh ideas from the youth. And we need also from the ground level how the youth can take part into the decision making. Because it's not the decisions making today, it's for tomorrow. And tomorrow, it's us. Tomorrow is the youth. So if youth didn't take part in this decision of today, they cannot implement it at the right time. So I think if we follow these criteria, then maybe we can give the better place to the youth. Thank you.
If I may abuse of my role of moderator, just from UNDP side, say that we very much agree with that. We have to remember that results are happening on the ground and that we need to formalize spaces as well for young people there. And we also need to support public institutions, public administration, political institutions to become more inclusive so that we can have a constituency that is really representative. Hopefully, I mean, next time we meet here, we will report on results. We will report on what's happening on the ground as opposed to simply, you know, putting on the table some possible solutions or etc. So, I mean, things are still moving, I think. We're making progress at a different level, but it's true that we should not be too focused on the global level only. I mean, only a few people can be in this room. It still can be improved in terms of the representativity, but we need to keep our eyes where change is happening on the ground. So, but thank you very much for making that comment. We have two actually young people that have been selected by the UN Youth Mechanism to participate from Sri Lanka. So I thought that maybe I would give them the floor so that they can also talk about that interaction and how this communication and participation is happening in the field. So we have Sizini Tirkavala and Shevandra Siyemane. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing well your names. The heart is there. You have the floor, please.
Ayubowan, everyone. So the youth mechanism in Sri Lanka is spearheaded by the UN country team. It's an interagency platform to identify and address key issues in relation to youth. It's composed of UN youth focal points representing each UN agency, and they meet on a bi-monthly basis. This mechanism provides the space and opportunity for the various agencies to share information, experiences, new developments, lessons learned, and also engage in further dialogue with different development partners. Now we invite stakeholders and partners to these meetings on a regular basis so that we can share ideas as well. Also, one key feature we see in this whole initiative of the youth mechanism is that it directly feeds into the One UN initiative, where we have recognized, especially in Sri Lanka, that development partners prefer to work with the UN as one entity rather than deal with different agencies. So, yes, thank you.
Sisini.
Hi all, I'm Sisini from Sri Lanka, and sharing my experience of engaging with UN. Well, I've been a volunteer. I've been volunteering with UN as a member of the VFORCE, which is a volunteer task force managed under UNV Sri Lanka. Well, being a member of VFORCE, I've been able to work with many agencies and work in different thematic areas, from peace building to SDGs to, well, let's say, volunteering advocacy as well. So I think my civic engagement, my civic participation as a young woman in the country has been through volunteering, and I also think volunteering can be a really good method that young people can engage in promoting SDGs as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Next on the list is His Excellency Mr. Faisal Abdul Ghaffar, Suriname Minister of Youth Affairs. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Minister of Sport and Youth Affairs of Suriname. The government of Suriname recognizes the huge potential of its youths. Our development plan identifies this priority as follows: creating a youth and child-friendly society in which children and youth can grow up in a healthy and safe way, develop their talents, and actively contribute to their own development and that of the Surinamese society. Our policies are therefore focused on creating the necessary conditions and opportunities to enable the participation of young people in society. The establishment of a Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs since 2010 is a concrete outcome of these policies. Suriname fully supports the idea that all countries and all stakeholders should implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in a collaborative partnership. Youth, in this context, is an indispensable partner in our common endeavors. Their energetic participation and innovative way of thinking can provide fresh approach to persistent challenges. In Suriname, we have structured the participation of youth through various youth-led institutions working together on their issues and identifying concurrent policies. The institutions that have been in place for over 10 years are the National Youth Parliament, the MDG Youth Ambassadors Program, and the CARICOM Youth Ambassadors Program. The election procedures for these institutions demonstrate the highest level of democratic participation, since the members are chosen through free and general elections. These programs have contributed to the involvement and meaningful participation of youth in matters affecting them, including in matters of governance, and have yielded many concrete results. In this regard, I wish to highlight the project developed in cooperation with our Ministry of Spatial Planning, establishing procedures to guarantee access to land for youth, to ensure adequate housing, and promoting entrepreneurship. Another project proposed by the MDG Youth Ambassadors contributes the improvement of learning outcomes by providing school children with supplies at the beginning of the school year. Following the adoption of the 2030 Agenda, the government of Suriname has transformed the MDG Youth Ambassadors model to take into account the new reality. The SDG youth ambassadors are now tasked with promoting the SDGs among their peers and identifying ways that youth can contribute to the realization. Our model of youth involvement and participation has paved the way for preparing the youth to assume leadership positions. I myself was elected twice as MDG Youth Ambassador, and I am currently the Minister of Sport and Youth Affairs, the youngest serving minister in our country ever. It also worth noting that the current Deputy Speaker of Parliament, who is present here with us, Mr. Melvin Bova, was the first Speaker of the National Youth Parliament and among the first MDG Youth Ambassador in Suriname. I call on world leaders and those in powerful positions worldwide to promote meaningful youth participation. Give them the opportunity to become engaged in achieving sustainable development. The Special CARICOM Heads of Government meeting on youth development held in 2010 in Suriname is testimony of the resolve of the leaders of this region involve youth, the efforts to achieve sustainable development. The Paramaribo Declaration emanating from this high-level meeting was subsequently implemented through the Caribbean Youth Development Plan. In conclusion, we invite the United Nations and its agencies, member states and donors, as well as the private sector to provide increased support, including financial assistance in the implementation of concrete initiatives that promote the involvement and participation of our youth. Our collaborative partnership now will bear fruit in many years to come. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we take more comments, is there any reaction from our panelists or any takeaway message that you would like to share or any comments? Maya? I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, sure. I was, thanks for the remarks in the room. Maybe something from my own experience as a youth delegate. As we have highlighted today, despite often engaging as positive change makers, youth remains underrepresented in political spaces. As we mentioned, policymakers often dismiss their perspective and needs. And even for us as youth delegates here at the UN, at the UN process, it can be frustrating at some times. And despite some examples of progress, for the most part, there is still a failure by decision makers to recognize the value of young people's contribution to the program's development and policy making. And the perception that policy making is an activity which is for experts and that young citizens do not have the necessary skills, expertise or knowledge continues to prevail. But yet we try not to lose hope as youth delegates and try to do our best, even if sometimes it's a hard job. And can I be frankly here in the room as a youth delegate? Okay. For example, last year we had a youth resolution during the Commission for Social Development, and we had some great speeches yesterday by some member states who were sometimes co-hosting this resolution, and in fact, in most cases, the youth delegates were excluded from this process. So I hope by this forum, again, that we can promote this program and that we can see what is said before, the meaningful participation of youth delegates in the program. Was that my sign? Thanks, I was finished.
Just when you wanted to be frank. Okay, so I hear that Mexico would like to take the floor. But I'm not sure who from Mexico at this point. I don't see them. I assume... Berenice? Okay, Berenice Alcalde, yes? Oh, yeah, I'm waiting for Mexico to respond. Do you have the floor?
Primero, bueno.
Thank you. Through Mexico, I wish to thank all the discussants here and Max Trejo. And yes, Agenda 2030 is a plan of action for the years to come. As you know, these deal with development in various countries in the world. Mexico is committed to combating poverty on multiple levels and more than looking at income, but in looking at drinking water and other aspects, including employment. There are various principles that our government has set out to turn our country into a Mexico that takes up social responsibility globally. And we aim to eradicate poverty in all forms, including in ensuring environmental protection and focusing on youth. There's also the issue of sexual and reproductive health and rights. And as you know, adolescent pregnancy is an issue. As we heard from OIJ, young people are subjects of law. And our Mexican Institute for Youth endeavors for youth to be drivers of development. We seek to involve young people in decision-making, for example, in a global plan, and for their effective participation in the development and implementation of various programs and initiatives. Mexico supports this, the global indicators and regional indicators, to help us to evaluate progress being made in various countries. Disaggregated data by gender and otherwise are very crucial to the 2030 agenda, and we believe it's very important, the action being undertaken by OIJ, and we invite other regions to build on this through youth institutes, through the various governments, to develop these indicators that will need to be cross-cutting across the 17 SDGs of Agenda 2030. And youth is a national priority. We need to ensure that all rights can be exercised in all countries. In this respect, Mexico, in this process of ensuring implementation and follow-up for the SDGs, promotes participatory actions together with civil society and local officials, and to ensure that youth is a part of this agenda. So we would invite all countries and all partnerships and all members here on the panel to move towards action and incorporate youth. As Mexico said in other forums, implementation of this agenda will present a major challenge for all countries. It will also present a great opportunity to ensure a more inclusive society that all deserve. It is key for young people to be a cross-cutting matter, sir, and to protect rights, including the right to health, education, to a decent job, to the full exercise of rights, and especially to ensuring the rights of women and girls are protected. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Dorina.
Thank you very much.
The monitoring again, I mean, Max also emphasized the importance of youth-focused indicators, youth-sensitive indicators. On that particular topic, I wanted to give the floor to Mary Ullman from the World Federation of the UN Association, with whom in her previous life at PLEN, we collaborated precisely on making sure that indicators could be youth-focused in the context of the implementation. The implementation has started, but we're still discussing national indicators, so would like to hear a few thoughts on that.
Hello, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Mari Ullman. I'm with the World Federation of UN Associations. And we have more than 100 national associations around the world, as well as youth networks and youth sections in many of those associations. I want to make a few points. This discussion has been really interesting, and there's a lot that I would add, but just a few ideas. As Noelia mentioned, I think, you know, and many of the panelists today have talked about the sense of urgency around this, and I think that's something that's really important. We want to make sure that young people are included at the planning stage of implementation around the SDGs. We want to make sure that we don't look a few years down the road and it's already been an opportunity missed, because young people need to be part of the conversation in the planning so that the direction and the allocation of resources and the measures of progress toward the SDGs are inclusive of young people. And so there needs to be some resources to make sure that young people can be part of that conversation. I also wanted to caution against something that I hear a lot about including young people by, putting something on a website or tweeting about it and using social media and that being seen as something that's inclusive of young people. Let's remember that social media is a tool. It is not the movement. It is not the people. And so it's a great way to communicate with young people, but there still needs to be, it doesn't replace young people's actual meaningful participation in the conversation at the table and putting resources toward that. In terms of also capacity building, I agree very much with something Mr. Trejo said earlier. There's a lot of discussion around capacity building for young people in how to engage with government, and this is very true and something that's very important and something I think Wafuna will be working on. But we also have to remember that there needs to be capacity building on the government side as well. Government representatives, again, outside, as Ms. Ibrahim said, outside of the youth ministry, outside of the education ministry, where people are maybe accustomed to working with young people or thinking about young people as stakeholders. This needs to go outside of those to the bodies that will actually be doing the implementation and responsible for the implementation and planning for the SDGs. So there needs to be some capacity building of how to work well with young people, how to build trust and build that relationship so that it's not something seen as foreign or added on, as well as to dispel many of the myths and stereotypes that we've been talking about here. And in terms of the follow-up and review, I was pleased to see in the Secretary General's report in the sections 64 through 69 talks about there being a, follow-up and review and monitoring being open to civil society, being inclusive, being participatory, and young people have the opportunity to be part of that. And not just for the global indicators that are being decided here at the UN, but also then at the national level. There will be national level indicators, and those might include indicators of participation and how well a country is doing at making sure that young people are part of the conversation. And I think that's something, even if the indicators don't go that way, that's something that civil society and young people can do. Let's track how well countries are doing, and including young people, and make sure we report that at the national, at the regional, and then at the global level as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So next on our list is Gabriel Medina, the National Youth Secretary of Brazil. We need the mic next to the minister as well.
Thank you, Noella, for giving me the floor. I will speak on behalf of Mr. Medina for matters of translation. And for the Brazilian delegation, we'd like to mainstream two issues. The first one that we find very symbolic to speak in this very city of New York, which we consider to be the center of this nowadays economical crisis, is for inequality. As we see, inequality nowadays is both the trigger and the outcome of this crisis, as the world is becoming more and more unequal, and the latest Oxfam report says that the top 1% of the wealthiest of the world, like 37 million people, they are holding now almost 50% of the wealth, and the other 50% lays with the other 99%. So as the climate bomb, we think the inequality bomb is one of the major risks for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. So we think we have to approach the model of accumulation and the kind of system and create an inflow from the rich and high and middle income countries to the low income countries to finance development and finance initiatives. And we think very much for youth is the moment to mainstream this issue and talk about inequality with more creative solutions and trying to reach out to hold accountable the responsibles for this crisis, especially the financial system, to finance development and create the opportunities to young people to achieve rights and have access to opportunities. The second part we want to mainstream is about participation. I think we have come a long way regarding participation in the speech, as it was said before, but still much to do regarding the UN Participation Forum for Youth. You know, we don't have like more permanent forums that can contribute and be meaningful and include grassroots movements and indigenous people and the most vulnerable. We think we have to make a switch to a more stable and permanent forum with more representativeness from youth from around the world with support of the budget of the UN. I think the idea of a participatory budget for the agencies could be a really good opportunity to walk the talk on participation issues, and I think this is an agenda that can mobilize many young people and contribute for the implementation of the 2030 agenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fernando. So the next speaker is the distinguished delegate from Zambia. Zambia, you have the floor. Zambia in the room. Okay, if Zambia is not in the room, then we will move to Russia, whom I understand also have to make an announcement. Russia, you have the floor. I don't know. I don't see them. Do you know where they're from? Yes? Fine. Oh, yes. Thank you, sir.
Здравствуйте, уважаемые друзья и коллеги.
Good afternoon, friends and colleagues. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to make an announcement here. It's very pleasant to be here with a large number of professionals. And given the great number of calls for movement from word to action, I'd like to talk about Russia's efforts to implement its national youth policy and to invite you to an event that will be taking place in 2016. Russia has always paid great attention to its youth policy. Our country has significant history and experience working with youth. We all have something in common: youth as the driving force moving forward and making progress. And I'd like to talk about one of the main calls to the youth in the upcoming years. This is access to information and new technologies. And the population differences and the quality of education and the quality of mutual respect among nations, and the respect for their history and cultures. As you probably know, Russia has accumulated great experience, and in our joint work also with the World Federation for Population Work, we've held conferences since 1945. And there's been participation from more than 160 countries. The main goal of this federation is to bring together youth to create a bright future for future generations. This global organization for democratic youth was one of the first to receive consultative status at the United Nations and also in UNESCO. We carried out a global youth festival in 1957 and 1985. That was 2 times, and both times it took place in Moscow, our capital. Much has changed in our country and in the world recently. Nevertheless, we have remained multi-ethnic in nature. We are very proud of our past, and we are looking forward to the future with optimism. In Moscow and Sochi in the coming days, this federation will be carrying out meetings with NGOs from Russia and the world. We will be looking to hold another festival of youth and students in 2017. Currently, Russia, with the rest of the world, is entering a new age. And there are universal values that we all share, such as family, cultural diversity, national sovereignty, equality, and human dignity. We are moving forward to a better future without a standardized system of values. And we believe there is true beauty in multiculturalism and diversity. We must build our new, strong, multipolar world together, and we must put youth at the center of this development. In Russia, youth is already a driver of many ambitious projects and strategies for development. Investment in the capacity of youth is the only path forward and the only way to achieve success. We must join our efforts for the involvement of youth in the process of decision-making. The creation of new paths to involve all youth and to increase the involvement of youth in civil society organizations and NGOs. We all share values of tolerance and the welfare for all of our nations. We believe that this can only be achieved by mutually supporting our ideas and projects. One of the areas of the work of this Federal Agency for Global Youth, which I am representing here today, is the creation of professional youth societies and equal access to education and continuous learning. We have carried out the first architectural forum for youth in February of 2015, where young scientists and professionals from the architectural field took place in this council and forum. It was wonderful to see how we can influence decision-making by working together. I would also like to note that last summer, 2015, there was also a youth summit, a BRICS summit in Russia, and many of the delegates present here today took part in that. And that summer we held 6 youth forums and 14 different youth societies took part. There were artists, historians, youth representatives, the Communist Party, and others. We carried very high-level events, such as the Universiade in Kazan, and in 2014 in the Olympics in Sochi. And in 2017, we will also be participating in sport events. We are prepared today, as Iran, to share our bright future with the whole world. And we are here today to ask you to invite 1,000 young people to participate in an exchange of opinions and to establish professional ties to form a long-lasting friendship. In the near future, participation in this forum will be very important, and these people will become leaders in their own countries to carry forward these processes. If we can simply have this unity and friendship that can be created at this festival, we will all be creating one large family. Of course, at any time, we can say, I want, and this is possible. But the time has come to say, I can, and it is necessary. Of course, our youth is our future, and the future will be determined by youth. on behalf of 35 million young people and 10 million students in Russia and 1,000 youth organizations. I would like to say that Russia intends in 2017 to carry out a youth festival in our country. We are prepared to answer any appeals by those who would like to participate in the organization of this. We will make this festival one of the greatest in history. Thank you very much, and we welcome you in 2017 to Moscow and Sochi. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, we still have 3 speakers on the list. We need to conclude. It's 1:05, so I will ask you to please be brief, maximum of 1-2 minutes if possible. So we have IUCN, Panama, and the Republic of Korea. So IUCN, you have the floor.
Thank you for giving me the floor. IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, would like to take this opportunity to support this forum and the importance of engaging youth in implementing the 2030 Agenda. IUCN has been involved in the formation of the 2030 Agenda since its conception and fully supports its mandate. The 2030 Agenda, including the Sustainable Development Goals, are hugely ambitious and have the chance to create systematic change. However, the success of the SDGs ultimately depends on the effectiveness of their implementation. The 15-year time frame of these goals means that those that will be primarily responsible for their implementation are today's young people. IUCN recognizes the importance of engaging the youth of the world to implement this agenda that has the opportunity to improve human living conditions for all. For this reason, youth engagement is one of the main themes of the IUCN World Conservation Congress that will be taking place in Hawaii in September of this year. The IUCN World Conservation Congress, held once every 4 years, brings together several thousand leaders and decision makers from government, civil society, indigenous peoples, business, and academia, with the goal of conserving the environment and harnessing the solutions nature offers for global challenges. Protecting our planet and its ecosystems will be one of the greatest benefits to young people and future generations. This is why it is important to educate the youth of the world about sustainable development. This can be done in the school system and by encouraging young people to volunteer their time and devote some of their energies to community service activities that will improve the health of the natural world and living species. On behalf of IUCN, and as a young person myself, I encourage members of my generation to think about how they might contribute to achieving the goals of the 2030 Agenda in their own careers. Businessmen and women, scientists, innovators, government officials, international civil servants, academics, and humanitarian workers alike can all contribute to the success of this agenda. The IUCN World Conservation Congress plans to address the topic of youth engagement in a number of workshops, including one on how to best use digital technologies to allow young people to experience and connect with nature. IUCN would like to ask the youth of this forum to join with us and partners to ensure that youth engagement is a reality for the implementation of the 2030
Colleagues, I'm really sorry.
Agenda.
We need to conclude soon because interpreters are going to leave the room otherwise. Thank you very much. Panama, you have the floor.
Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I had a statement that's longer than 2 minutes, but I'll try to be as brief as possible. We are very pleased last year to have adopted Agenda 2030 based on a strong commitment to work firmly towards implementing the Sustainable Development Goals and targets so that we can have a better world. The participation of young people is crucial in this process. Panama sees young people as a symbol for progress, energy, determination for the present and future. We will promote the Sustainable Development Agenda through them. My country would like to welcomes the OIJ. We have a strategic plan and an interinstitutional plan for youth in that respect, involving the Ministry of Social Justice and with strategic partners, including OIJ and UN entities and youth agencies, as we developed a plan to include young people and indigenous peoples as well. Young people are the present and future of humanity. They make up a great part of our population, and so they must be involved in national policies and plans of action. We wish to seize this opportunity to thank the United Nations through the Special Envoy of the Secretary General for Youth and the various agencies involved, and OIJ, which have actively supported our officials in developing our strategic interinstitutional plan. And to make this a reality, I thank you.
So to conclude, we'll ask the Republic of Korea to take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. I'd like to make this question very brief because we're all hungry. So first, I'd like to thank Dorina for giving such a moving message from the YMCA and how you believe in youth. And I think the youth minds are very fragile and vulnerable. And one thing that many youth empathize is that in many cases, youth do not really trust that the elders recognize and believe in the youth and their abilities due to their past experiences. And this creates a vicious cycle that when they grow old, they do the same to the youth to them because they think it is something that they can do. So I wanted to ask the YMCA and many other organizations how they show the youth and the society that they do believe in the youth, and how would you make them believe that your organization believes in their power and their abilities? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dorina, if you want to respond, and then I will give you the opportunity to say one last word, your top recommendation for youth participation in the implementation. Thank you so much. We need to conclude really soon.
Thank you for your comment and the question. As YMCA, I think we try to create a safe space for young people. It's very important that in all the YMCAs everywhere in like 118 countries we work, we try to make the space when they are themselves. And by working with them, we see transformation, and then by working, they impact the community. It's very important that we build leaders and we give them confidence that they can give to the community. There are so many examples of projects and programs that have really had impact. In my case, where I'm from, we have a project called Leadership Program.
Sorry, Dorina, we're going to have
this.
We really have
okay, so it's important to create a safe space and to give them confidence.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm sure we'll have other occasions to discuss it on the same. Thank you. If you want to literally have a 10-second thing, or if there is nothing to add, then we will conclude the session. Is that okay?
No.
Okay. You want to add one thing?
No, I just want to say that youth is the future. We are the future. Give us voice, give us space, and we give you the better world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dorina. Thank you, Hindou and Saya, for your inspiring participations. Thank you also to Noela, Richard, and a los relatores de las sesiones y a todos los panelistas.
And the rapporteurs and all their panelists for their presentations this morning. I won't take up more time, just to remind you that we will meet again this afternoon at 3, and I would really appreciate your being on time. This meeting is adjourned.